Name's Lambeau Fields.
All right, let's close our eyes, bow our heads. Okay, you can open your eyes again.
Why don't you act like a barbell and get benched?
Violence is not the answer!
Yeah!
The Comebacks, you're stepping into a loud, over-the-top sports parody that takes every underdog cliché, cranks it up to absurd levels, and then sprints straight through the fourth wall. Released in 2007, the film embraces the chaotic energy of mid-2000s comedy, blending slapstick humor, pop culture spoofs, and exaggerated sports drama into one relentless comedic blitz. At its core, it's a satire of inspirational sports movies, the kind where a disgraced coach finds redemption through a scrappy team of unlikely heroes. But here, everything is intentionally ridiculous, exaggerated, and shamelessly self-aware. The story centers on Lambeau Fields, played with exaggerated bravado by Carl Weathers, portraying a coach whose career has been defined not by triumph, but by spectacular failure. Fields has built a reputation as perhaps the worst coach in college football history. Wherever he goes, losing follows. His schemes collapse, his strategies implode, and his motivational speeches often miss the mark entirely. Yet, despite the humiliation, there's something undeniably persistent about him. He's not malicious, he's just absurdly misguided and clinging to the fading hope that one day he'll engineer a comeback worthy of a sports documentary montage. That opportunity appears when he lands at Heartland State University, a fictional program desperate enough to hire him. The team is a disaster. There's no unity, no discipline, and barely any talent. What Fields inherits is less a football team and more a collection of misfits who seem to have wandered onto the field by accident. It's the classic underdog setup, but instead of a touching, slow burn to redemption, the film chooses chaos from the start. Among the players are personalities so exaggerated they border on cartoonish. You have the arrogant quarterback, played by Matthew Lawrence, who believes he's destined for greatness despite lacking consistency. There's the emotionally volatile wide receiver, the overly sensitive linebacker, and even athletes whose backstories parody other famous sports films. The humor often leans into spoof territory, deliberately referencing and exaggerating tropes audiences have seen countless times before. It doesn't try to be subtle, it wants you to recognize the parody. Supporting the madness are characters played by David Koechner, Brooke Nevin, and Melora Hardin, each bringing their own comedic timing to the ensemble. Koechner, known for his life-size performances, adds a manic energy that perfectly matches the film's chaotic rhythm. Brooke Nevin provides the film's more grounded presence, though even she isn't spared from the outrageous humor. Melora Hardin's performance leans into the satire of authority figures and institutional seriousness, contrasting sharply with the absurdity unfolding on the field. Director Tom Brady approaches the material with an unapologetic commitment to parody. Rather than crafting a straightforward sports comedy, he leans heavily into spoofing not only football movies, but also broader pop culture. The result is a film that feels like it exists in a universe where every dramatic sports speech, every slow-motion training montage, and every emotional locker room confession is ripe for mockery. The training sequences are intentionally absurd. Fields' methods are less about athletic discipline and more about bizarre motivational gimmicks. Traditional drills are replaced with questionable exercises that blur the line between genius and insanity. Instead of heartfelt bonding moments, the team's unity forms through shared embarrassment and chaotic trial and error. Yet, beneath the parody, the film still follows the familiar underdog structure. The team starts at rock bottom, humiliating themselves on the field. Losses pile up, confidence falters, critics mock them. It's the predictable arc, but exaggerated to such an extreme that it becomes its own punchline. As the season unfolds, something unexpected happens. Against all logic, the team begins to win, not in graceful cinematic fashion, but through messy, accidental victories that feel like pure comedic fate. Plays succeed almost by coincidence. Opponents underestimate them, and occasionally, Fields' unorthodox strategies accidentally work. The transformation isn't polished, it's chaotic, but the scoreboard starts to shift. The film builds toward the playoffs where Heartland State faces the intimidating Lone Star State Unbeatables, a name so overconfident it practically demands parody. The Unbeatables represent every exaggerated sports villain trope: unstoppable athletes, dramatic entrances, and smug confidence. They are framed as the ultimate obstacle, the final boss in a sports comedy video game. What makes the matchup compelling isn't genuine suspense, but the escalating absurdity. The film throws logic out the window during the climactic game. Plays become increasingly unrealistic, commentary grows more outrageous, crowd reactions amplify to cartoonish extremes. It's a crescendo of parody, blending action with rapid-fire jokes. Despite the absurd tone, there's still a thread of redemption woven into Lambeau Fields' journey. His career has been defined by failure, ridicule, and disappointment. Coaching Heartland State becomes his last chance to prove, to himself more than anyone, that he isn't destined to be a punchline forever. While the film never abandons its comedic identity, it briefly touches on the emotional vulnerability beneath Fields' bravado. His desperation to succeed, to finally silence critics, adds a thin but meaningful layer to the humor. Visually, the film captures the bright, energetic aesthetic typical of mid-2000s comedies. The football sequences are fast-paced and exaggerated, prioritizing comedic impact over technical realism. The editing leans into quick cuts and reaction shots, heightening the absurdity of every hit, fumble, and improbable touchdown. The soundtrack reinforces the high-energy tone, complementing the chaotic momentum of both the games and the jokes. At its heart, the film is less about football and more about poking fun at the formula audiences have come to expect from sports dramas. It understands the beats intimately: the disgraced coach, the ragtag team, the crushing defeats, the emotional halftime speech, the miraculous comeback. Rather than subverting these tropes quietly, it shouts them out loud, exaggerating them until they collapse under their own weight. The humor ranges widely, from slapstick physical comedy to meta jokes that directly reference other films. Some jokes land cleanly, others rely heavily on shock value or topical references that firmly anchor the movie in its era. It reflects a specific comedic style popular in the 2000s, one that favored relentless gag density over subtle character development. For viewers who grew up on inspirational sports movies, the film feels like a chaotic mirror. It doesn't reject the underdog narrative entirely. In fact, it secretly embraces it, but it insists on laughing at every step along the way. The team's bond forms not through polished heroism, but through shared absurdity. Their victories aren't poetic, they're messy, loud, and often accidental. Yet, by the final whistle, there's a sense that something genuine has emerged from the madness. The dynamic between Fields and his players anchors much of the narrative. He oscillates between delusional confidence and desperate self-doubt. The players initially see him as a joke, and perhaps he is one, but as improbable wins accumulate, their skepticism softens. The locker room transforms from a place of chaos into a strange, dysfunctional family unit. In discussing this film, it's important to recognize its role within the broader wave of parody movies that defined a period of comedy cinema. It doesn't attempt to reinvent the genre. Instead, it commits wholeheartedly to exaggeration. Every emotional beat is undercut with a punchline. Every triumphant moment is accompanied by a wink to the audience. By the time the final game reaches its climax, the film has fully embraced its identity. It's not striving for authenticity, it's striving for entertainment through excess. The Lone Star State Unbeatables embody everything Heartland State isn't: polished, dominant, confident. The confrontation becomes symbolic, not just of underdogs versus champions, but of chaos versus order. And yet, even in parody, the film allows the possibility of triumph. It toys with expectations, building tension in its own exaggerated way. The final moments lean into spectacle and humor simultaneously, delivering a conclusion that aligns perfectly with the movie's commitment to outrageousness. Looking back, the film stands as a snapshot of its time, an era when parody films were unapologetically loud and self-referential. It captures a style of humor that prioritized rapid jokes, pop culture nods, and fearless absurdity. While it may not aim for emotional depth, it provides a relentless comedic ride built around one simple premise. What if every sports movie cliché was pushed to its most ridiculous extreme? In the end, the story of Lambeau Fields and his misfit team isn't just about football. It's about persistence in the face of humiliation. It's about refusing to accept the label of failure. And above all, it's about finding humor in the very structure of stories we've seen 100 times before. Through chaos, parody, and outrageous exaggeration, the film carves out its own strange version of redemption, one that laughs at itself every step of the way while still charging toward that improbable, hard-earned comeback.